Hi everyone, welcome to my video for the upcoming Libra new moon. So rather than do individual geoscopes, I've decided to just do one forecast. I'm waiting for a new microphone, and I'm sure you're getting tired of the horrible sound that I have when I'm recording my readings. So I thought I'd just do one forecast, and we can pick up things again for the full moon at the end of this month when we get to Halloween. But I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to cover a couple of things. The first is the overall energies for the next 2 weeks with the analysis of the chart. I'm also going to have a look at the Sabian symbol, the fixed star aspects, and of course there's a breakdown per sign for each individual sun sign. But of course I have now included that on my written report too, so if you want to read that in depth and have a think about it, you can always just go to that page, which is in the membership section of the website. So I hope you enjoy this, and let's get started. So before I get into the energies of this particular new moon, I thought it good to just kind of summarize for those new subscribers what new moons are all about and what they're really good for. So new moons essentially are the beginning of a fresh lunar cycle, so it's a new 28-day cycle for the moon, and so they're great for beginning new projects, for resets, and for sowing intentions. So this is a great time if you want to manifest something in particular, to plant the seeds of your intention. And of course, the more it resonates with whatever the sign and the Sabian symbol is of that particular new moon, all the better for really amping up the sort of attraction levels. So this is the period when we are moving into the 2 weeks of the waxing moon cycle. So this is when we move from the dark to the crescent moon, and then to the full moon, which ends the waxing moon cycle, and we then move into the waning moon cycle. So this forecast is designed to cover the 2 weeks between the Libra new moon on the 16th of October, and then it takes us up to the Hunter's full moon on Halloween on the 31st. So the Libra new moon is going to be a bit of an interesting time. It's kind of a tale of, two sets of energy. And for that reason, it's going to have a slightly push-pull, jagged energy to it. So on the one hand, we've got the stellium in Capricorn of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And they're kind of creating a sense of pressure and urgency, making us get very clear about what it is that we want to do moving forward, and what needs to change in terms of the systems or plans or structures that aren't currently working. And then we've got the Sun and the Moon in Libra, which wants to, it wants peace, it wants harmony, it wants justice, it wants fairness and equality, particularly when it comes to relationships. And then on the other side, we've got Mars retrograde in Aries, which is champing at the bit to get going, but it's actually not in a position to do so. It's kind of retrograde at the moment, so this is going to create a bit of tension. And then the other thing, of course, that's happening is that Venus will be making some fabulous aspects to this stellium. So don't be entirely disheartened by this quite challenging energy, because there is an antidote, which I'm going to get into in a bit more detail. And then another theme that's prominent at the moment is traveling and movement. This is being highlighted by Mercury retrograde, but also by some wonderful aspects between the Sun and the Moon and the fixed stars. So for me, this is more about a kind of internal shift or healing journeys, and I think that the theme around shamanic journeying, which I wrote about in relation to Mercury retrograde, is going to be very useful now and over the next 2 weeks, where while Mercury is sort of retrograde. So do bear that in mind. And then the Sabian symbol is drawing our attention to what needs to be kind of rounded out, corrected, or sort of evened out. Anything that's just distorted or off balance now needs to be sort of addressed and brought back into balance or equilibrium. So another theme that we'll kind of get into in more detail. And finally, of course, this Libra new moon happens in the cardinal air sign of Libra. So air is actually the element of the heart and also the throat chakra. So I think if there are any conflicts or problems that come up around about this time, the answer to kind of addressing these is communication, and this is two-way communication, because we are talking about Libra, which is all about balance. It's a dual energy, so we need to talk and listen, and we need to give and take when it comes to relationships. So that's something to sort of bear in mind. And of course, the energy of Libra too is very much about centeredness, balance, the middle way. And I think the key to navigating through the next couple of months is really to try and stay as centered and as kind of balanced as possible within ourselves, and not become overly reactive, and that way we won't be sort of caught up on that wheel of fortune as it sort of spins very quickly, due to all the volatile energy being created astrologically. So those are some of the main themes. Let's get into them now in more detail. The Sabian symbol for this particular new moon is a third wing on the left side of a butterfly, and this is really kind of drawing our attention to where we may be a little bit out of balance, or where things may have become a bit distorted. So here I'm thinking particularly about where in relationships, or say creative partnerships, or in money relationships, things may have become off center or off kilter a little bit. It can also point to those areas where we have perhaps got underdeveloped skills. So say for example we are right-handed, we tend to then become over-reliant on our kind of right hand, and to the detriment often of our left hand, or the sort of benefits of ambidexterity. And I think the same thing is true of creativity, as well as money and relationships. So this is really a time to try and bring things back into balance, to try and round out perhaps where we have skills that are underdeveloped, or perhaps where we might have become a little bit lazy or have blind spots, because I think that we need to kind of prepare ourselves for a changing world. We're moving into that Aquarian age again in December, when we have that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So that's going to usher in a whole new era, and I think we need to be preparing ourselves for it. And part of that is realizing perhaps, where we need to upskill, perhaps where we need to kind of work on being more well-rounded, and generally kind of getting a sense of what we have to offer as well, and staying centered, so that we don't flap around and panic and waste our energies, but rather get sort of into that sort of central position from where we can move very easily. I keep thinking of the Wheel of Fortune in the tarot, and I remember a good friend of mine always saying to me, if you're in the center of the Wheel of Fortune, then you don't get buoyed about by the sort of turning of the wheel. You are always in the center, and you can handle whatever happens, whatever life throws at you. And I think that's the sort of mentality to cultivate right now. That's what Libra is trying to draw our attention to. Now, the Libra new moon takes place at the peak of an astronomical phenomenon known as Mars opposition. And this occurs roughly every 26 months or so, and it's when the Sun and Mars line up on opposite sides of the horizon. So you could say that it's like a Martian full moon, because the rays of the Sun strike Mars and make it much more visible in the night sky. In fact, you can see it most nights at the moment without a telescope. So I think what this is doing is, from an astrological point of view, is it's almost lighting Mars up. Mars is like a flashing red light saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I think that what it's likely to translate to is attention-seeking behavior. This is really Mars wanting to be seen. It's the masculine energy wanting to be seen, acknowledged, heard, and but the problem is that when you've got the Sun and the Moon in opposition to Mars, it's kind of like you've got kind of willpower and ego on one side, and then you've got the emotions and the intellect on the other. So it tends to create frustration, willfulness, competitiveness, sometimes a little bit of inflation, and this can lead to conflict. Now, this is one aspect of the energy at this at play in this new moon. There is other energy that is going to provide an antidote, and that's Venus. So I have actually done a video where I talk about the dance between Mars and Venus, and how they're going to be really important over October and November. So if you are a member of my website, just go to the membership section and have a look. I've listed it under the videos for this particular new moon. So as I mentioned in my summary of this particular new moon, the antidote to all that difficult Martian energy, as well as the T-square involving Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto, is going to be Venus. So she's going to be prominent for a number of reasons, not just because of her rulership of the sign of Libra, but also because she's going to be making some really positive aspects to Jupiter, Pluto and Saturn in the week that follows this particular new moon. So she's going to be applying to these as we get to the new moon energy. Now here she's going to be working through the elements of air and earth. So in the first instance, of course, we've got the moon in Libra, and this is the element of air. This is Venus expressing herself through the element of air, and it's all about, as I said, communication, as well as a kind of communion, a meeting of hearts and minds. It's also about reciprocity, because air flows very easily from sort of one set of pressure to another, and I think that's the energy, the kind of lightness of being that we want to try and cultivate at this new moon in order to get through any particular challenges or sort of difficulties. So that's the one thing to say. And the other then is that Venus will be in Virgo, which is an earth element. Now in a way, this is going to be Venus expressing herself in a similar way to the way she does in Taurus, which is one of these signs that she co-rules. So here her emphasis is going to be very much on being grounded, but also things like service, purpose, and self-containment. This is about finding value. It's about getting very clear about our worth, and also about our purpose, because in conjunction to Jupiter, Pluto and Saturn, this is about making changes to the way that we view ourselves, so the way we value our skills, our sort of whether these are personal or professional, or indeed in the area of relationship, and then how we put those to use for the greater good of all, because of course Jupiter, Pluto and Saturn are all outer planets, so they're more concerned with community and with sort of social aspects of kind of living and so on. So I think one of the key themes that we're going to see at this particular new moon and in the 2 weeks that follow is a real search for where we can add value to relationships, or to creative projects, community efforts, that kind of thing, but also just in terms of where we belong on a kind of soul level. So this is about getting clearer about who our soul tribe is, and also what kinds of projects we want to be getting involved with sort of moving forward. And here I think Venus in Virgo is really fantastic in terms of service. So those are just some of the themes to bear in mind. I have, as I said, done 2 mini videos for members of my website all about Venus and her role in both abundance and in the law of attraction. So check those out if you are a member. I have linked to them at the bottom of the forecast, the written forecast for this new moon, but they are also available in the membership section under the videos for the Libra new moon. Now, for those of us who are interested in the astrology of this particular new moon, here's the chart. Now, of course, we've got the sun and the moon in Libra down in the 5th house, and then we can see that big red square that is happening between particularly Saturn in Capricorn in the sort of top right-hand corner, and then it goes over to Mars in Aries in the sort of top left corner. Now, what I haven't mentioned, of course, is that Mars is going to be quite close to Black Moon Lilith. And so I think that is really drawing our attention to what the Sabian Symbol was saying about the need for to kind of correct any blind spots, any distortion in our vision, in our emotional sort of intelligence, and maybe the way that we do things, because of course Mars is all about action. So it can also be about the way that we assert ourselves and our needs, particularly in relationships, because of course Mars is opposing the sun and the moon in Libra, and Libra is of course the sign of relationships. So this could be about the way that we negotiate things, the way that we go about sort of getting what we want. Maybe there's a need to switch up our communication style. Possibly there's a need to reassess whether the way that you sort of kind of rebalancing our needs versus those of others, and also possibly the way that we express or deal with difficult emotions like anger or resentment, that kind of thing, because both are going to be sort of pointing towards Saturn in Capricorn, and this can sometimes be about maturity, emotional maturity. Saturn in Capricorn is very much about old age, and of course as we age we gain more experience, we gain more mastery and wisdom, and generally speaking we tend to improve the way that we did things when we were young. Mars for me is very much that kind of impetuous energy of youth. And then Libra is that sort of middle ground of this sort of the adult. So we've got almost like the teenager in Mars, the adult in Libra, in sort of the sun and the moon, and then we've got the sort of the elder in Saturn in Capricorn. So that's one way to view this energy. And then the other thing, of course, is that we can see that Venus in Virgo is not far off from the moon. She's at 16 degrees of Virgo, and the moon is at 23 degrees of Libra. So here you can see there's a blue line between her and that stellium in Capricorn, along with the fixed star Vega. And I put the fixed stars in here because there's actually a lot of contacts between the planets and the fixed stars at the moment, and many of them we've already encountered at earlier either eclipses or lunar phases. And so for me it's almost as though all the different pieces of the puzzle are slowly kind of coming together. We've been dealing with each sort of almost individually at the various eclipses and moon phases, and now they're all starting to come together like a symphony, even though it probably doesn't feel that way in the outside world. But slowly things are kind of coming together as we build towards that winter solstice conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, which is going to coincide with an eclipse. So that's what we're really building up to in this last quarter of the year, and so we've got to do some clearing and some adjustments before we sort of press the reset button in December. That's the way to view October, November, I think. So aside from that, we've also got as I say, you can see across the horizon we've got the lunar nodes, which are in Gemini and in Sagittarius, and they are sitting with several important fixed stars actually. So on the left we've got Capella and Betelgeuse, I think that's how you say it, and then on the right with Sagittarius with the south node we've got Ras Al Hague. And this for me is really about very important collective clearing of sort of karma and blocks and that kind of thing, which I'll get into when I talk about the fixed star aspects in a little bit more detail. But I think that kind of gives you an overview. The other thing, of course, to say is that both the sun and the moon will be in the Via Combusta. They've passed 15 degrees of Libra and they're now in the Via Combusta, so they are officially in the underworld as far as that's concerned. And that's another pointer to me that the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is kind of suggesting about the need to plumb our depths, to go into the underworld, to take healing shamanic type journeys, in order to heal past blocks and to sort of to move through areas where energy may be a little bit stale or obstructed in some way. Now that you can do that in a number of ways. You can go for any kind of energetic clearing. You can also do things like, as I say, shamanic healing, soul retrieval, and also something that's very popular at the moment is Akashic Records readings. Very often there's a healing component to those, so lots of things to consider. And another one that I experienced recently is called the emotional code. So I think that's quite apt, given that we are at a sort of a new moon, which is all about sort of emotions. So just a couple of things to think about at the new moon and in the 2 weeks that follow. So by now you're probably wondering, well, how does this Libra new moon affect me personally? And of course, for that I have produced my breakdown, which kind of lists where the Libra new moon, how it will impact each individual sun sign. So the way that you can read this is to look for your rising sign, because then the house placements will be correct, much the same as with the geoscopes. So other sun or sort of signs you might want to look out for are Virgo, because that's where Venus is going to be, as well as Scorpio, which is where the retrograde Mercury is going to be, and then Capricorn for Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto, and finally Aries, which is, you know, where Mars and Black Moon Lilith are going to be. Now I have included those in my written forecast for members, so you can either pause the video and you know, to sort of read these and take your time over them, or you can go to that written forecast if you're a member, and it's all there for you. So now, for those of you who are interested in the fixed star aspects, the moon and the sun will be making some quite prominent aspects to a number of fixed stars. So I'm going to deal with those individually. So the first is that the sun and the moon will be conjunct Arcturus and Spica. Now these two fixed stars are in the tropical sign of Libra, but they're actually in the sidereal sign of Virgo. So Spica is actually the alpha star of Virgo, and the reason that I bring that up is because this particular fixed star is very auspicious because it's associated with abundance, and in the constellation of Virgo it's associated with the sheaf of wheat. So as well as being implicated in the Eleusinian mysteries, it's also very much associated with abundance and with, you know, and with harvest. So I think this is going to play into that wonderful trine that we've got between Venus and Virgo and some of the outer planets that I talked about earlier. Now Spica is also a very brilliant star. It's very bright and it's associated with brilliance. So I think what this is also asking us to do is to shine our light, to kind of come into our full splendor and glory, and really kind of come into our own, to find our niche, and to understand why we're here. So that's one sort of thing to bear in mind. And then the other is Arcturus, which is the alpha star in the Great Bear. I think it's also called Bautes. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly. Now here it's all about spiritual protection, because its name is actually, it means guardian or watcher. Now the Arabs had a couple of names for Arcturus, all of which kind of speak of guardian spirits or keepers. So the one is Haris el-Samar, which is the keeper of heaven, and then Haris al-Shamal, which is the keeper of the north. So these were associated with some of the archangels. So that's just something to bear in mind. And I think what it's talking about here is if you are feeling a little bit vulnerable at the moment, or in sort of out of your comfort zone, to really sort of call on your guardian spirits and guides for help and for protection, because that will certainly be available to you now. And I think it's also saying that, even though you might not be aware of it, you are being looked after, in the sort of the higher realms, the other dimensions. Now, Arcturus is also one of the stars associated with starseed alignments, and here it's very much associated with downloads. So at this time you could have some important realizations where you start to put the various pieces of the puzzle together. You start to join up the dots, because Arcturus is associated with innovation, with futuristic systems, with sacred geometry, with architecture, that kind of thing. So it's very much about joining up the dots and seeing things from a much higher perspective. And I think that's what we're being asked to do now, is to sort of rise above any political conflict or aggravations that are sort of going on in the 3D, and to sort of see the bigger picture. And that will help to maintain our perspective and help us to keep that equilibrium that the Sabian Symbol is really emphasizing at this new moon. Now, the other important fixed star aspect that will be happening at this particular moon phase is as kind of a set of trines and sextiles to the nodes, and then to 3 fixed stars that are going to be aligned with the lunar nodes at this time. So the lunar nodes are currently in Gemini and Sagittarius, so they're going to be sitting on either side of the horizon at the time of this new moon. And on the left, on the sort of the eastern horizon, with the North Node in Gemini, is going to be two fixed stars. One is Bellatrix, which is associated with the she warrior or the Amazon. So this is the star in the left arm of Orion, the hunter or the shepherd. And the other fixed star is Capella, which is part of the constellation of Auriga, the charioteer. So this is for me why I think that that journeys are going to be important, particularly internal journeys. Now, it's also emphasizing the vehicle, and I think here we are not necessarily only talking about physical vehicles such as, you know, cars, bicycles, spaceships, or whatever, but also energetic ones like, say, the Merkaba. So that's something to think about, particularly if you are thinking about doing sort of shamanic type journeying. Now, this fixed star is also associated with horses and therefore with freedom and independence, as well as raw strength and emotional energy. So think about the chariot in the tarot, and think about how you've got the charioteer holding the reins of two horses that are driving the chariot forward. Now, this is actually, as I've talked about in a previous forecast, this is a metaphor for the Merkaba. This is a metaphor for the sort of three aspects of ourselves, you know, our kind of vehicle while we are here in 3D, of sort of the unification of the physical, the soul, and the spiritual, and how we need all three parts to sort of work together to come into alignment so that we can sort of move forward smoothly and get into the flow. So that's going to be important. Now, on the right hand side, along with the south node in Sagittarius, is going to be Ras Al Hague. So this particular fixed star is the head of the serpent bearer, also known as Ophiuchus or Asclepius. So this is the shaman healer, and of course, because it's associated with the serpent handling, it's also associated with Kundalini energy. So Ras Al Hague is going to be very prominent in December when we get to those eclipses that we've got in Gemini and Sagittarius. So do bear this in mind, file this away for later, because we're going to come back to this. But I think if we pair these two things, and if we consider that the South Lunar Node is about karmic release and about healing, then I think what we are being asked to do now is to do some internal journeys of healing that are going to help us to release some stuff around conflict and the way that we go about resolving differences. So this is Bellatrix, the she warrior, and then also how we pursue our goals, you know, being the hunter or the shepherd, and then you know, also how we handle our own energy. And this is, you know, talking of the charioteer as well as the serpent handler. So I really think that this is very strongly emphasizing the need for healing over the next couple of weeks. And as I say, I do think this forms part of the overall energies that we have during Mercury retrograde, which are building up towards December. So something else, you know, to bear in mind, you know, during this time, if stuff comes up for healing or release, it's really the time to sort of let it go. And if you want to work with this energy more consciously, then you know, consider some form of healing therapy, as I say, whether it's something like a past life release type of therapy, like, you know, the emotional code, or whether it's you know, soul retrieval, you know, whatever kind of works for you. But you know, I think there's a real opportunity here as part of this need to clear and rectify distortions, for us to have some really important healing, not just on an individual level, but also on a collective level, because the lunar nodes can also point to, you know, old collective patterns that need to be cleared now around things like conflict, war, domination, and of course hegemonies of colonialization, etc., etc. So you know, plenty of food for thought there. So that's it from me for now. I hope you found that helpful and useful, and that you'll benefit from it in the coming fortnight. If you're interested in the dynamics between Venus and Mars, particularly in relation to the law of attraction and abundance, then do go and watch those bonus videos that I've created. And if you aren't a member, think about subscribing, because it will give you access to extra material and extended reports and videos and things. But anyway, I'm wishing you all the very best for the next fortnight, and I'll catch you again at the end of the month for my full moon forecast.